Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Fulfillment Podcast, where we help discover a better you by finding fulfillment in life, relationships, and finances. In this episode, this is the fourth episode. In this episode, we talk about the law of attraction broken down into the first step and the first pillar of, as I understand and what I've made, the law of attraction, 3 pillars. The first pillar is the visualization. So I know the last one we talked about law of attraction, there's a lot of information that was left out. So I wanted to do a little 3-part mini series on the 3 different pillars that I've built into what the law of attraction are and how you can manifest using it. So the first one, and that's what this episode is really going to cover. It's an awesome episode. Talk about the relationship and the finances and the life side of this visualization step. So I really like a lot of the content. I think it's going to relate to a lot of the questions that you guys have been asking me and a lot of the feedback that I've been getting. So pretty pumped about it. Love this topic, and I love kind of like what we're talking about here in this little mini series. So without further ado, let's get you guys into the episode. Welcome back, everybody, to the 4th episode of the Fulfillment Podcast. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. This one we're going to talk about. So law of attraction was the topic of the 3rd episode. So I kind of wanted to break it down got into pretty much like the basics of what the law of attraction is. So in this episode, I really want to dive into what is the 3 steps we talked about, right? We talked about step 1 was visualization. Step 2 was taking massive action towards that visualization. And then step 3 was removing the resistance that gets in the way from you achieving that visualization. So what I want to do is kind of break it down to like a 3-step mini-series and more or less make this the first episode of the mini-series just on the visualization. So what is that first step, that visualization? What does it mean? How do we do it? I love when people tell us about stuff and they don't necessarily explain it. So I want to explain it for you and really break it down so you understand how you can portray that into your life. I know you can talk to mentors and all sorts of people and they'll give you all sorts of great advice. And we sometimes don't necessarily know how to translate that into our life, because it's kind of the piece that I guess more or less gets left out for people when they do like the personalized, like one-on-one coaching kind of thing. But in this instance, let's put it into the podcast. Let's get the episode out there, and then you guys can more or less just do it yourselves. So you don't really have to worry about it. It's not hard. It's not difficult. It's just, what does it mean for you? And obviously, it's not going to be super tailored to you as an individual in like what your circumstance is. But I'll give you some like basic examples. So in each episode, I'll go through the basic sides of the 3 pillars, right? What this podcast is about: the life, the relationship, and the finance side. And I'll give you an example of what visualization can look like in each one of those things, and then how that breaks down and can translate more to you. And then obviously you'll just have to take that and, move it into your actual life in this, instances or whatever you're dealing with specifically. But I think that gives you a really great, like launching point more or less for where you're trying to go. So first step, we talked about visualization. We talked about in the last episode, in episode 3, talking about the law of attraction. We talked about what visualization is and what it plays relevance into the whole law of attraction. I pretty much broke it down into law of attraction being 3 critical steps: how to get something or how to manifest something into your life, the visualization, the taking action, and the removing resistance. So the visualization piece that we're going to go over in this episode is, how do I visualize, right? If I want something, and I know we talked about in the last episode, wanting something means you don't have it. So you don't necessarily want to visualize desiring or looking to achieve something. You want to visualize having that. So, and I think that right there could be the biggest breaking point for somebody really just trying to understand this is you don't want to visualize wanting that, right? So you don't want to visualize. We'll start with relationships, right? Because maybe that might be the broadest spectrum. I think the most people I talk to are relationship based. So let's start with relationships, right? So you don't want to visualize what it looks like trying to have a happy relationship, right? You don't want to visualize trying to cooking meals or something if that's something you enjoy doing with somebody. You don't want to visualize missing somebody or, feeling that absence of presence of, that person that would be there to cook meals with you or to, do meal prep and stuff with you or to do your nutritional, plan and all those kind of different things. You don't want to visualize kind of like the absence of that person. You want to visualize more or less what's the lifestyle like when you have that, or what would it seem like? What would it be like? How would it feel if you did live in that lifestyle, right? If you did have that. So what I like to do, in order to kind of do that, instead of, seeing what the want side feels like or seeing what the have side feels like, is I go back to previous instances in which those things have existed for me. So what that means, like, all right, sure, Josh, whatever. But what that looks like is, I know I talk about this one relationship a lot, right? Because it had a lot of characteristics that I look for in a happy relationship. So I always kind of visualize different instances from that relationship. So for example, what I'll do is I'll sit down, and you can call it pray, you can call it meditate, you can call it whatever you want. The same things, right? We all call the same book different covers, but it's the same thing. So if you want meditate, right? When I sit down and I meditate or spend time alone or think or pray or, whatever you want to call that. When I sit down and meditate, I visualize the times in which I had the abundance of these emotions present in my life. I remember that there would be times where, I remember I said I was in the Army in my bio one, and I would get off of work. And well, I'll even start before that. So while I was at work, right, while I'd be at work, she would send me, emails because, secured servers and stuff. So we couldn't necessarily be texting all the time with phones, but we would do email traffic since we were both, she was also military. So we both had the ability to communicate through the military email network. So we would email each other. And when I'd get the emails, just like the rush and positive emotional feelings that kind of rushed through me, I visualize and kind of try to embrace again what it's like to have those kind of feelings kick back up through yourself. So I put myself in those shoes, right? I think of myself back when I was living that life, and I sit there and I'm like, oh man, okay. So I remember what it was like to get those emails. And I remember what it was like to read those messages and hear her say, I can't wait to see you. What do you want to cook for dinner? Or should I pick up this or whatever? Or like just the feelings that I had when it felt like we were in sync together and things were going well and like that kind of stuff. I visualize those emotions, and I breathe, and I kind of like consume, if you can, right? I consume through my mind the emotions of what those feelings are. And that's the visualization techniques that I'm talking about. I remember when I would be, like driving home, certain songs, right? We'd have, obviously, usually in relationships, you have certain songs because songs link to memories in your brain sit as, different things, right? You have scent and sound and all these other things, but, different songs and stuff. And I remember I would play music, obviously, that we had, the playlist and stuff at the time. Sounds super corny, but the playlist at the time had the songs that we would kind of like play that reminded us of each other. So I would play, the music on the drive home. And I just remember like the rush of emotion, the emotional highs that I would experience when we were driving home, or when I was driving home from work to go see her. Just, feeling those emotions again. Sometimes you even can play those songs and stuff again, and you'll get those kind of emotions, and those feelings will kind of come up. I know sometimes if it's a painful relationship or it's a painful breakup or, something like that happen, and you haven't quite crossed your ego over to accepting of what that is and learning how to improve, it may still be painful to think about those memories and to think about those things, because those are happy things and now they're torn away from you. But when you start visualizing the memories and you start seeing them clearly as you did that time, because now maybe you've gotten past that, you've gotten past the point to where it's painful and you realized, I want to make that happen again. That's not the right person. There's a plan and there's a sequence of things that are happening in my life. And I'm here to visualize and make that same thing better, right? And to experience it again. And you're moving past the grief phase and you're moving into, the law of attraction and making it work for you. You can visualize those things and they don't cause pain anymore. Now they're causing the happiness and you're getting those positive emotions back. And like anything said, energy or emotions is energy in motion. Everything is energy. So I'll say this a lot too, and I haven't actually yet, which is kind of surprising. But energy or emotions is energy in motion. Everything is energy. Everything is energy. Energy is everything. So emotions is energy in motion. The more real you can feel that emotion, the more real the energy you build around it, the more real the vibration you build around it, and the more accurate you can make that visualization that you're trying to manifest. So let that kind of sink in for a minute and just kind of wrap your head around it. the more real you can feel those emotions. Get the negativity out of the way. That's why you gotta get yourself into a place to where you're not sitting there and you're not grieving over, the breakup or the person that did your heart wrong and, broke your heart or did all this stuff or whatever. You got to pull yourself away from that, and you got to get yourself over that and realize, hey, I wasn't maybe who I needed to be at the time, or maybe there was some growth and stuff that they had to go through. They weren't the right person for me at the time, but there was something that wasn't right. And now what's next is going to be so much better. I can't see that, so I don't know how to trust it. But as long as I do what I need to do, the next thing that comes along is going to be that much better, and I want to be ready for it. Pull yourself out of the grieving state, put yourself into the progress state, right? So where you're going to be progressing, moving forward, and you start taking those, instead of seeing them as negative emotions, you start portraying them as positive emotions. Then you can start visualizing with more energy and with more emotion. And the more emotion, the more real you can make that emotion, the more accurate your visualization is going to be, and the more accurate your goal, right, that you're trying to get to is going to be. And as you get there, you'll see, right, the more accurate you are with what you want, the more possible or what you're going to achieve is going to be. It's going to be a more accurate achievement for you. You're going to portray your goal in a positive sense. You're going to get there more efficiently. So that's kind of like the first piece to it. Right now, let's look at maybe the finance side of things. So that was a relationship example. Now let's dive into kind of like, what does it mean on the financial side? Well, let's say maybe you're struggling you got a 9-to-5, you got a real basic job maybe, and you're just struggling to figure out how to continue to pay the bills. Maybe the bills are just really adding up. You're trying to stay on top of your credit card bill, but that's getting out of hand because you're trying to pay your mortgage and your utilities. You're trying to make sure, rent and everything's covered, and you're trying to pay for, maybe the baby food and, the car payments, and everything seems like it's just piling up and getting on top of you. And you're like, man, I really wish I would have some financial independence and financial abundance right about now, because that would be fantastic if I didn't have to worry about money. So what does that mean? Well, let me tell you what that means. I was there. I've been there, right? So how that works is when you want to visualize, right? And it's hard because I think the hardest part about visualization is you're trying to see something that maybe hasn't existed yet, right? I try and relive those certain memories and certain feelings and stuff because they have existed for me. So I can kind of latch onto those and feel that as real as possible. But a lot of it, for the most part, You've never seen it before. You've never felt it before. You've never been there before. If you're trying to get out of this place to where you have financial abundance and financial independence, but you're struggling to, pay the bills and keep up with the credit card payments and mortgage and rent and utilities and everything else under the sun, right? If you haven't seen what financial abundance is before, then you don't know what the hell to visualize, because you haven't seen it before. It doesn't exist in your head, right? You have to create something that to you has never existed. So you don't know what the hell you're doing. So what does that look like? Well, there's a lot of different ways to kind of go about that. And I'll touch on one, but there's several different ways, right? So what you can do is obviously talk to a mentor. You can talk to somebody who's been where you want to go. And I think that's one of the most important parts in all of this is the value of finding a mentor is almost priceless, right? If it costs you $1,000 a month to have a mentor who has been there and who will get you there, if you work with them and they, work by your side and you take their advice and you use their advice and apply it to your day, that's almost priceless, because it's going to take you from where you are today at point A, and it's going to move you to where you want to be at point B. You don't know where you want to go, or you don't know how you're going to get there. You just know you want to be at point B. You're currently at point A, and the space in between the two, the mentor helps you figure that out. And that's kind of what the whole visualization aspect is identify something that you want to achieve, right? Identify where you will be. And I understand, like, you're at point A, you want to get to point B. Now imagine me pointing up on the wall right now, and I'm pointing at the kind of the bottom of the wall and then the top of the wall. Now there's a lot of space between where I'm pointing at the bottom point A to the top of point B, right? There's a ton of space in between the two. And right now the space is empty. There's a point up there and there's a point down here. And then everything in between is just empty space. Like question mark. We could put a question mark there, right? How? What? A to B. How? Question mark. Nobody knows. That's not how the visualization piece works. That's kind of the next step of taking action. The visualization piece is, what is point B? you're at A, figure out what point B is. If point B is, I want to be able to manage my finances, have more income coming in than income going out. Maybe I want to live at all my necessary expenses are 50% of everything that I'm making. So I'm spending on everything, on my utilities, on my rent, on my car payments, on my insurance. All that stuff is only 50% of everything that I'm bringing in. So if you're bringing in, we'll say $3,000, you're only spending $1,500 on your rent, your utilities, your grocery bills, the necessary things you need to live. The other 50% can be spent on, investing, saving, getting on top of things. And then you're going out money, you're going to the movies, you're grocery shopping, all that kind of stuff. Or not grocery shopping, but going to the movies, going to the bar, hanging out with your friends, that kind of fun stuff, right? So maybe think of it like that. Understand, this is where I want to be. I want to be at 50%. That's what my lifestyle would look like. What does that look like to me? So start painting the picture. What does point B look like for me? You don't know how you're going to get there. We're not worried about that yet. That's the next episode, right? So we'll talk about that next episode. But this one, trying to figure out how are we going to get to that point, or what is that point B for us? What does it look like? What does point B look like? And if it's that 50% financially, then you start painting the picture for you. You start painting the picture for yourself so you can see what that lifestyle looks like. And then when you start taking action, it's a lot more accurate to you on what you're trying to achieve. When you start taking that action, you can see that. And that's how the law of attraction starts. That's how you start to manifest these different things, right? Maybe what does it look like? So we'll go back to the relationship piece. Point B for you. Maybe it's what does the point B look like? Well, maybe it's reliving kind of those, if you're in a point where you can go home and somebody is there to take care of you and someone's there to make you happy. Maybe it's the relationship feels natural. You know how sometimes you have to feel, and I absolutely hate this, but I know that if I feel like I have to host somebody, it takes a lot of energy out of me to feel like I'm constantly hosting somebody. And I don't want to be in a relationship with somebody that I feel like I have to host all the time. I want it to feel natural. I want them to come and be a part of my life and, help themselves to the water and, help themselves to, drinks or whatever it is they want. They understand that my space is their space. They can use it as they wish. We're a team together in this. And that's kind of what I want. So maybe that's what I would visualize if those are the things that I want. Maybe you've got something different. Maybe it's you just want to be able to go on a car ride, or you want to be able to go camping, or you want to be able to go do something with somebody and not feel rushed to get back, not feel pressured into, going to a certain place or doing a certain thing, not feel like you're dragging them along because they really don't want to go because they're a city, slicker and they like staying in the city and you love getting out and going to the country. And, maybe you just have like this divide. So why would you be with somebody that doesn't want to go do that? If that's what you want, right? Why get a cat when you want a dog? Or why get a dog when you want a cat? Doesn't make sense, right? You're not going to sit there and teach the dog to meow or the cat to bark and expect to be happy because it doesn't, when it doesn't work. It's not going to happen. So stop asking for a cat when you really want a dog, right? I think it's a funny analogy, but I read that in a book and I think that's actually probably the funniest thing that I've ever heard, but it's so clear. It's so real. It provides all of the clarity that I needed in that example. The cat and the dog. If you want a dog, don't get a cat. If your point B is a dog, right? The person, I'm not saying get one unless you really want a dog, but in the relationship aspect of it, don't paint the picture of a dog, of somebody that does things that you don't want to do or that you don't like to do or that isn't part of your natural vibration, right? Don't paint the picture of point B if that's not what you want. Because if you do that, you're not going to be happy. So don't do it. Paint the picture, that point B, paint that picture to be what you want to be. Make it the dog or make it the cat. Make it what you want to be. And then when you get there, you'll know because you got what you want and you're going to be happy with it. And that's called the road to genuine happiness. And that, if I could break visualization down to anything, that would be it. Identify what your point B is. You're at point A, identify what point B is, and paint the picture of what you want that to be as accurately as possible. If you want financial independence to be your point B, then by God, make financial independence your point B. Don't settle on financial stability. No, that's too many steps lower than financial independence. Make it financial independence. What does financial independence look like for you? Are you working a 9-to-5 job? If not, okay, it's not part of point B. You're not working a 9-to-5 job. All right, then what next? Maybe you're making that point where your expenses, your 50% of expenses is less than half of what your income is. Right? Maybe you're making more. Maybe part of your financial independence, or maybe part of your point B is owning your own business. What would that look like? Okay, point B is owning my own business. I'm visualizing what it's like to own my own business. Well, that makes taking action a lot easier, right? Now I know that when I take action, I know what I have to do because it looks like owning a business. So you see how this works? Like when you start breaking things down like this, it makes it so easy. It makes it so clear. When you start understanding what you want to have in life, when you have things get in the way of that, you know how to get rid of it because it's not part of your point B. It's part of your point A. It's not where you're trying to go. If you're not trying to go there, get rid of it. It's not part of the plan. It's not part of the plan. It's not part of your destiny. It's not part of point B. So get the hell rid of it and stick with point B. Point B, you already decided what point B is. That's where you want to go. You want to be at point B. I love it. Sometimes I get on a rant and I think I just get fired up. I had my little cousin over a few weeks ago and she was like, I love that you just go on these rants sometimes. It's so entertaining. You just talk and you spew so much information and it's great. I learn a lot, but it's just kind of funny because you get super passionate for about 30, 40 seconds and it's hilarious. So that was an example of one of my rants, but I think it's so clear when you think about it like that, people, when you start thinking, okay, I'm at point A, I want to get to point B. I don't know how to do it in the middle. That's not for this. That's part of the next step. I'm just working on point B. What does point B look like for me? Point B is financial independence, or point B is relationship, with these kind of characteristics that I want to have. Or point B, we'll talk about it in the life aspect, right? What does life look like for you at point B? Maybe it's maybe you're single. Shit. That's definitely a point B thing that you could have. Maybe you want to be single. Maybe you don't want to be in the relationship that you're in because there's too much resistance in it, right? So maybe your point B is you want to be single. I know that actually kind of gets into more of the relationship side. So let's try this one again. Maybe point B is you want to be able to have a lifestyle to which you can dedicate more time to your kids, right? You can spend more time to be with your children. To where right now maybe you're not spending enough time with your kids and you want to be able to do that, or your spouse or whatever. But maybe you want to spend more time doing something, right? You want more time to yourself to be able to do with it what you want. So when you look at it in that regard, right, what does that look like? Okay, so I want more time. How would more time look like in my life? What would that even equate to? Well, maybe you just, and it's always going to usually boil down to, and I'll say this once and I'll say this a million times, it's always going to boil down to two stresses in your life. There's two common stressors in any given person's life, and it's relationships and finance. So it's always going to boil down to one of those two things. So if you want to spend more time with your kids, maybe, the relationship you have with your, spouse is something that maybe you need a little bit more help on, or you can work together to find a time or to find a way that, maybe you work less and they pick up a job and now you can spend a little more time with the kids where they can't. Or maybe you're just letting your job kind of get in the way, right? I know a lot of people, I've been there. I don't have kids, but I'm saying I've been there to the point where I've let my job get in the way of relationships and stuff. But to the point where you're like, you can't say no to people and you just end up saying yes and yes and yes. And you end up taking the meeting and you end up taking the call and you end up taking the client and you do all these things that before you know it, now you're, 30 minutes late for dinner and you're missing out on that critical time with the kids before they go down, so maybe that's another example. Or maybe you want to go on more vacations, right? Well, what does more vacations look like for you? Well, you think, more vacations is I need to have more money and I need to be able to do things. Well, what if it's just pulling the trigger on buying some tickets and going to Hawaii or to the Caribbean or to wherever you want to go? What if it's just pulling the trigger? You can afford it. Do it. Why not? Or maybe you can't afford it. So go on a road trip somewhere. Travel. If you're in the US, travel to somewhere that you've never been to before because there's a million different places you can go. If you're somewhere overseas in Europe, go travel to another country. Go check out somewhere you've never been. It's too easy to do things that you think get in your way, right? We let money or whatever get in our way. And it gives us like a scarcity mindset of we think we can't have these things, but we can. And we only get in our own head. So I think visualization is huge. It's the biggest part. It's the first step. You have to identify where it is you want to go. If you have a big old wall or you have a big old whiteboard or whatever, on the bottom of it, erase the whole damn thing. On the bottom of it, point A. On the top of it, point B. And you're going to see a ton of space between the 2 points. Start writing down some characteristics of what you want point B to look like. And then understand, all right, now for the next episode, I'm going to look at how the hell am I going to get to point B? If I'm at point A, how am I going to get to point B? Once you've characterized what point B is, once you've visualized it, then you can get there. But spend that time. Sit down and think. Meditate. Pray. Do whatever you got to do. I sit down and I meditate. I meditate for at least 10 minutes a day. Generally, it's more than that. It's probably closer to that half hour. But some days it's actually closer to an hour. But I need that time to sit and to focus myself and to meditate and to spend that time just sitting there in silence, in complete silence, and just sitting there. And sometimes I got this little like water fountain I'll have, and I'll turn it on in the background and it'll go. But I like having a little bit of tranquility. But I just sit there and I visualize and I think to myself, what is it that I'm looking to achieve? And what does that feel like to me? Can I feel those emotions? Can I make that feel as real as possible to me? Can I get myself into the state of what that looks like? And by doing that, by constantly surrounding myself with those feelings and those emotions, I'll put myself in that state. So I hope that explains a little bit. Again, if you guys want, send me some feedback. If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, please rate the podcast. Send me some feedback on there too. The more downloads and the more follows I get, as well as, the more positive feedback that we get, the better the podcast is going to do, the better it pops up. So I'll probably be saying this in the first few episodes, but thank you guys so much for all of your feedback. Thank you for following. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading everything here. Follow me on Instagram at fulfillment_coaching. Send me any messages in the DMs there. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to the 4th episode. The 5th one, we're talking about taking action and what that looks like. So follow me on the 5th episode as we continue to move through this little mini series of the Law of Attraction. Thank you, guys.